Hey all, JTC here, and today we're going to go over the newly released changes that are being made to Shade and Sister of the Thorn later on this week. I haven't had a chance to look at these yet, so we're going to go ahead and just dive straight into it with Shade. But first, I just want to point out that I'm happy that they are looking to support different playstyles, because that is what really gives this game its replayability. Sure, there are, a bunch of different careers just at the base level of it. There's 5 different playable characters, 3 playable careers each, 15 technically different playable characters, but if each one has a different playstyle, 2 or 3, that adds so much more replayability and just value to the game, and that's what kind of gives it its unique flavor. So I'm happy they're going this route. But just jumping straight into the changes, moving past that, it looks like they just buffed Assassin's Blade from 50 to 100%, which is fine. It looks like they nerfed Murderous Prowess. Instead of it being a critical hit backstab, it has to be a charged critical hit backstab. I'm fine with that. I'm not really torn over that. Blur is really, really cool. Parrying an attack and quickly dodging grants Krillion's stealth for a short duration. This is something that I'm really looking forward to, because parry, just as a mechanic in this game, is not expanded upon enough. Why? Because parry is locked behind a trait, which, as everyone knows, Swift Slaying is the king, and no one's going to run parry over Swift Slaying, realistically, because Swift Slaying is just so much better. But if Fat Shark decides to start adding parrying as a mechanic into careers passively, that's going to unlock an entire, unique skill set with parrying, and it's going to add even more depth to the game, and that's something I'm looking forward to. I'm super excited about Blur. And then lastly, Dagger in the Dark melee attacks from Stealth are always critical. I'm pretty sure this has always been the case for Shade, but this is just being added for transparency's sake. And then let's go ahead and look at the talents. Exquisite Huntress, increased duration of the headshot damage buff up to 10 seconds up to 5. This is something I'm not completely sure, because realistically, this perk was by far the best out of her entire option right here, so I don't know why they buffed it. My assumption is that they actually nerfed the headshot damage down to 5% and they just forgot to say it. I would be very, very shocked if they straight up buffed Exquisite Huntress and didn't nerf the damage and compensation. But that's my guess. Talent 4-1. Hold up. I'm horrible at this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, replaced with Chain Killer. Successive charged backstabs increase backstab damage by 25% for 5 seconds, which stacks up to 2 times. So an overall nerf to this specific talent, but remember, it's a nerf because it's compensating for the original buff to Assassin's Blade. So technically, I think it's a 25% buff, right? That's 100%, yeah, because 75 plus 50 is 125%, 100 plus 50% is 150, so it's an overall buff. If you run these 2 talents, you'll get more backstab damage in general. Now, still, I'm not a big fan of backstab damage on Shade, because when you're running a finesse weapon like dual daggers on Shade, you're going to be doing so much more damage with headshots than you are going to be doing with backstabs, which is why on Shade, it's really not worth it to go for backstabs over headshots in any case. So I'm not really too keen on these changes, but that's besides the point. And then Vanished replaced with Focus Slaying. Killing an enemy with backstab grants cooldown reduction for 3 seconds. Mwah. I love this. I love this, A, because it's getting rid of Vanish, and Vanish was just completely broken and needed to go. And B, cooldown reduction for Shade is something I feel like she needs. Shade used to have this entire... What's the word I'm looking for? Shade used to have this entire ideal of being a boss killer, but over the years, she's been kind of nerfed repeatedly into the ground so that she kind of stood at this really, really awkward place where she wasn't really a boss killer. She wasn't really, a special killer. She wasn't really an elite killer, but with this change, this kind of brings her more into kind of like a roaming elite / special killer, because she's going to be able to invis much more often, which is going to allow her to be able to pick off high priority targets faster and allow her to pick off or kind of invis out of a situation and pick off, a special in the distance. So this is going to give her kind of more of a flexible playstyle and make it easier, which I'm all for as well. And then Cloak of Mist is being replaced with Shimmer Strike. Leaving Infiltrate grants Krillion's stealth for 3 seconds. Killing an elite or special enemy extends its effect by 1 second. Okay, that is quite interesting. So, from what I'm understanding, you ult with Shimmer Strike up, you go invisible, you stab an enemy, and then a timer begins for 3 seconds. Whenever you kill an enemy within these 3 seconds, or a special or an elite enemy, the duration that you're invisible is extended by 1 second. If that's correct, I think that's going to be really, really cool. Because once more, it's going to help her kind of be that, like, roaming elite / special killer. That's going to, give her more of an identity as kind of like a melee skirmisher or a melee brawler, which I think is what Fat Shark is really, really leaning into with this new rework so far, from what I'm, understanding. She's no longer a boss killer. That, was old 2018 Shade. That's no longer what Shade is meant for. I think she's being more designed to be like a stealth brawler, with specifically targeting elites and specials, and this is going to help her a lot as well. Especially, dual daggers with patrols, easy peasy. So I also am a huge fan of that. And then lastly, Shadow Step, which is terrible, I'm happy it's being replaced, is being replaced with Hungry Wind. Leaving Infiltrate grants Kerillian 10% movement speed and 50% power with the ability to pass through enemies for 10 seconds. Infiltrate no longer grants damage, bonus damage. Okay, so it's basically like a different playstyle for Shade then, is what I'm understanding. If you don't really want to deal with, having to chain backstabs together, or you don't really want to have to, like, think too much, you could just throw this on and, get, invisibility with some damage or with some power increase and some bonus movement speed. So I also like that. It's a slightly easier talent to use than the other ones, but I'm always okay with like one more beginner-friendly talent and then 2 more advanced talents. And then, of course, the long-awaited Sister of the Thorn changes. Starting us off is Black Venom Blades. Melee attacks apply Black Venom, dealing damage and increasing damage taken by 12% for 10 seconds. This is probably going to be replacing a Murder of Sprites, since that's where most of Sister's damage output was coming from. So by replacing Murder of Sprites with this is going to reduce her damage output and make her much more of a support-oriented career, because she's going to be applying a lot more debuffs across the board. Realistically, this is probably going to lead to more damage done across the board from Sister, because it doesn't say that there is a hard cap on how many enemies can be affected by Black Venom Blade at once, and my assumption is that there is going to be no cap. It's just going to be, if you hit them, they have the debuff applied to them, which realistically is going to allow people to do much, much more damage. But the reason this is going to be okay is because it's going to be spread out across her entire team rather than focused solely on herself, which is really good. And then Talent 2-2, Authority's Delight, Authority's Delight, however you pronounce it. I think it's just, updating it to work with Black Venom Blades, which is fine. Isha's Bounty, casting Thornwake grants Kerillian 2 critical strikes, guaranteed critical strikes, which is just a nerfed version of Moriah Higgs' Doom Sight, which I'm perfectly fine with. This was too strong as is and should have been replaced. Bonded Spirit, which is Cruel Bargain. This new one reduces the cooldown of Radiance by 50%. Taking damage sets the cooldown back by 2 seconds. Okay, so it's kind of like an opposite of Incandescence. Instead of allowing Radiance to stack twice like Incandescence, it just decreases the cooldown of Radiance by 50%. But if you take a hit, you gain some charge back. Now, this is kind of begs the question of mathematically, how is this going to work out? I'm not good at math. I'm not going to try to work it out here on the video, but it might turn into kind of like a centered versus unusually calm on Battle Wizard, where unusually calm is just mathematically better across the board. So one of these might be mathematically better across the board. I'm not really sure which one it's going to be, but that might be how it turns out. And then Radiant Inheritance, consuming Radiance grants Kerillian and nearby allies 15% power and 5% critical strike chance for 10 seconds. Beautiful. I don't know why Radiant Inheritance specifically granted Sister a buff when she's supposed to be a support-oriented career. She's not a damage career. So changing Radiant Inheritance to a buff, a team-wide buff, rather than just a self-buff is good, awesome, amazing. We love it. Pale Queen's Choosing replaced with Recursive Toxin. Black Venom can now stack 2 times. Okay, so my assumption with Black Venom being stacked twice is that the damage taken also is increased by 2 for 24%, which is also going to be huge. Like, if that's the case and Black Venom stacks twice and the damage taken stacks twice, up from 12 to 24%, that is absolutely going to lead to more damage dealt than just, with Murder of Sprites. That's going to be huge. But once more, because it's spread out across her entire team and not specifically centered on Sister herself, it's going to be fine. Critical strikes. Oh, this is 5-2. So Mora Higgs Doomsight. Critical strikes now apply Black Venom to enemies near the target. I could see that being useful and useless. It just depends on if there's a cap to how many enemies it can spread to at once, A, and B, the radius of it. Ironbark Thicket now increases the width of the wall. Still bad. Ironbark Thicket just needs to be completely reworked from the ground up. Blood Razor Thicket replaced with Tangle Grasp Thicket. Thorny vines now erupt from Kerillian and travel towards the targeted area. Enemies hit are dragged towards the target area. Okay, so this kind of seems to be like a forward shout, is what I'm reading this as. So what I'm assuming is that you ult in front of you, and then the wall shoots out in front of you and moves towards the target area, which then drags enemies backwards along with it, which sounds like a kind of directional shout rather than an AoE shout, which sounds fucking awesome. I like that. If that's how that works, that's going to be really, really good. And then lastly, Black Venom Thicket. Thornwake instead causes roots to burst from the ground, staggering enemies and applying black venom to them. Okay, that appears to be more of like what we're used to with a shout, but rather than it being centered around Kerillian, it's kind of a on-demand ranged shout, is what I'm understanding. So just taking a cursory glance at these changes that I'm seeing to Sister and Shade, I am really, really liking what I'm seeing so far, especially with Sister. I think absolutely everything with Sister is a step in the right direction and is really kind of making Sister what she's supposed to be rather than what she has been this entire time. A support-oriented career like Warrior Priest versus a damage-oriented career, like Shade or Bounty Hunter. Now, I'm still not really sure. The only thing I'm really unsure of is Bonded Spirit and how it's going to work with Incandescence. We might have one just kind of mathematically out-challenge the other and cause the other one to be useless. That might cause a problem. And then, realistically, I'm not a huge fan of Shade still having, backstab damage, because, like I mentioned before, headshot damage is just better on Shade across the board, so there really is no reason to go for backstab damage unless it's physically impossible for you to get a headshot on an enemy. But other than that, I am really excited about these changes, and I think they're all amazing changes, and they all are a step in the right direction to really balancing out these careers and making them each unique and fun to play. So thanks so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and hopefully I will catch y'all next time. Peace.